I like cultists, so maybe it will come as no surprise to learn that I also have a lot of Chaos Space Marine cultists. Now, as sure as the coming of the day, a codex has been leaked. This time with only a short amount of time before the codex is actually out, as pre-orders for the Chaos Space Marine Codex are tomorrow. I want to focus on the Chaos Cultists. We'll be looking at some of the changes to the rules, some of the changes to the units, and a little bit of advice on how to use the Chaos Cult in the upcoming Chaos Space Marine Codex for 10th edition. First of all, we have a change to the core army rule. Now, when you take a Dark Pact, you take any casualties before you get the bonus. In the Index, you would get the bonus, and then after using the sustained hits or lethal hits, you would roll your leadership test and then take some mortal wounds, potentially, if you fail the test. Now you may lose some models before you ever make any kind of impact with those sustained hits or lethal hits. So the Index was do and die. A sort of attitude you could take when you have your very last people. You may as well do a Dark Pact if they're gonna die anyway. Now you may just die and not even get to attack if the test is failed. We have the introduction of the damned keyword. So this is for your human mortals and the mutants. These are the Traitor Enforcer, the Dark Commune, the Cultist Firebrand, the Cultist Mob, Accursed Cultists, Traitor Guardsmen, and Fellgore beastmen. Chaos Spawn are not damned. We also have the new detachment, the Chaos Cult detachment. This lets you take another sort of Dark Pact called a Desperate Pact, but only on those damned units. And this is in the movement phase or the charge phase or other times but with stratagems. You can add 2 to your movement, or if it's done in the charge phase, you can add 2 to the charge roll. But you cannot do this when coming from reserves. So you can't turn up 9 inches away, do a Desperate Pact to then have a 7-inch charge. Not allowed, unlike the Orcs Warhorde, where they have the Here We Go stratagem that allows them to do that. So that is just the damned keywords units. So not all your nasty possessed, not your chosen combat units, none of them. And because of the amount of wounds you'll be taking from those Desperate Pacts and Dark Pacts, when you have Leadership 7, taking large cultist units is basically a requirement. So I'm not looking at all of the changes, I'm focusing mainly on the cultists. The ones I like. Lucius the Eternal is gone from the Codex and will appear in the Emperor's Children Index that should be released soon, for free, on the Warhammer community. What Games Workshop is doing is basically testing the rules out before a full release, perhaps at the end of this edition in another 2 years. It is still possible that this Redacted Codex could be the Emperor's Children Index, and that is when they're going to be released onto the community, but it is looking unlikely. Games Workshop wouldn't announce the Emperor's Children will be an index on the 16th of April, and then still leave the image redacted. We're looking more likely to be Imperial Agents. It seems that the Emperor's Children will be an add-on to the Chaos Space Marines, as the Dark Angels Codex is an add-on to the Space Marine Codex. So you can still use the detachments in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, and potentially you'll be able to use the Emperor's Children detachments as a Chaos Space Marine player. So at least for now, the Emperor's Children should get access to all the same units as the Chaos Space Marines. Unlike the Thousand Sons, the World Eaters, and the Death Guard, the Emperor's Children will still be able to take Bikers and Raptors for the foreseeable future. While Lucius the Eternal is gone, the former Emperor's Children Apothecary Fabius Bile, Fabulous Bill, is in the Chaos Space Marine Codex, and Huron Blackheart, an older model, is still around. The weapon options for the Chaos Lord are changed to match the Blackstone Fortress version, with a Demon Hammer and Plasma Pistol, or the new silly version with an Accursed combat weapon and a Power Fist. I mean, the model is fine, but rules-wise, it's silly. There is no need to have 2 combat weapons when you can only choose 1 to fight with. You pick 1 weapon. So my Chaos Lord with a Plasma Pistol and Power Fist, who has lasted since 3rd edition, will just have to use the stats for a Demon Hammer. They are nearly identical, just hitting on a 3+ instead of a 2+, and gaining devastating wounds. I don't think anyone will mind. The Chaos Bikers have had a change to their rule. They can no longer go into reserve. They're a combat unit now, and they get +1 strength if they charged. So onto those cultist units, the damned units. The Cultist Mob, they can no longer use autoguns, or flamers, or heavy stubbers, or grenade launchers. That includes the cultists with grenade launcher and heavy stubber that came with the Cultist Firebrand in the Blackstone Fortress box. So now there is nowhere to use the heavy stubbers outside of the overcosted Legends heavy weapons team, and it's overcosted because it's designed for you being able to take 3 las cannons. But I think for your cultist mobs, if they have auto guns, they're going to end up being played as traitors, or you should get a legends variant based on the index rule. I don't see why not. What was perfectly fine for the start of this edition should be okay a bit later in the edition. It seems silly to have these models and not be able to use them. I really don't like the new Chaos Cultists. I think they're a bad monopose kit. And considering how many cultists you're expected to need in this army, you're going to have to get very creative with the conversions, otherwise you're going to have a lot of models in exactly the same pose. Now, it was understandable that the previous set was monopose because it came in a starter box. The 6th edition starter box for Warhammer 40,000, and it was the same box released for the start of 7th edition, since 6th edition was the shortest lived of all the 40k editions at just under 2 years. So the Cultist Mob is knife and pistol only. Hopefully there's a points drop for them since we're losing so many weapons. The traitors can no longer double up on special weapons. It is now 1 of each per squad. This is what comes on the sprue. Now at the start of the edition, you could take 3 special weapons and there was no restriction. You could triple up on the same melter gun. Then it was changed so that you could only have 2 of the same kind. Now it is 1 of each per squad. Perhaps much like the Cultist Mob, in another edition, they will lose all of their special weapons. But that's unlikely since the sprue does actually have those kind of weapons. The Traitor Enforcer and his Ogryn friend, their rule has changed. They no longer give insane bravery and then destroy a bodyguard model. This is basically how commissars work. Instead, he makes Overwatch free once per turn, and then shoots a man for not shooting too well. Narratively, that's very odd, and since you can only have 1 auto-hitting flamer in the squad, you're probably not going to want to cap a dude just to fire off an Overwatch. Unlike the other cultist unit, the traitors are locked to a 10-man squad only, though in the Chaos Cult detachment, they also gain battle line, so you can take up to 6 of the traitor squads. And you just flood the board with models. The cultist Firebrand is back. He was his own character in 8th edition, but existed only in Legends for 9th edition. He was very overcosted at the time for 30 points for what is essentially a heavy flamer. Now he has an even better flamer and lets your units reroll leadership tests. This is very important for the Dark Pacts and Desperate Pacts because they are a leadership test. So some of the stratagems give you a better bonus if you pass your leadership test, and then you don't lose models when taking the Dark Pact or Desperate Pact. We don't know what he'll cost, and even if we found out the points in the Codex, the points will change very soon. I'm just really hoping that all of these cultist units are very cheap. If I can have a bucket of cultists and just pour them over my enemy's models, and if the enemy model is entirely covered, the enemy model dies along with all the cultists, if that's an easier way to figure out combat, that'd be great. But it'll be points dependent. At the start of the edition, the Accursed Cultists were the best. They were tough, because they could regenerate D3 models in every player's command phase. And because you have big guys with 3 wounds and little guys with 1 wound, you can exploit target selection. So if you're hit by a las cannon, you take that on a single wound guy. If you're hit by a lot of small arms fire that's damage 1, you take it on a big guy, because a torment with 1 wound remaining and a torment with 3 wounds remaining still attacks with the same power. They were fast because you could advance and charge with them if they had a Mark of Slaanesh and a stratagem. They had some decent hitting power. They're only hitting on a 4+, so anything that was -1 to hit was very upsetting to them. But through weight of attacks, they could bring down enemies, and they started out at objective control 2. So they were amazing for holding objectives. Then we had an update to them in January, so okay, they're tough, and you can still do the target selection shenanigans, but they're only going to regenerate in your command phase. Still just as fast, still same hitting power, but they were reduced to objective control 1, and then their points went up. Chaos players start to care a bit more, and they've been seeing less and less play. They have changed quite a bit now. We no longer get any kind of regeneration. Now they have scouts. So they're still very fast and able to get onto objectives, even if they're now only objective control 1. Having scouts won't help attached characters because of how scouts works. If your character and the bodyguard unit have scout, then they can scout. If the character added to the bodyguard unit doesn't have scout, then the unit does not scout, and vice versa. However, in the Chaos Cult detachment, there is the Warped Foresight enhancement to give the bearer scout. Obviously, you are only going to do this if the character was joining the Accursed Cultists. Or if you're going in the Alpha Legion style detachment, that is where cultist mobs and legionaries get infiltrate. Having Accursed Cultists with Scout will mean that they are also able to move up the board very quickly, because they will start 6 inches closer to the enemy. Then you can do a tactic I've mentioned before with the Genestealer cult, where you try and pin the enemy in their deployment zone so that you have control of the board. It works really well with infiltrators and scouting units. So the Accursed Cultists have lost regeneration, but they now have an ability to let them move when they're shot. This is very similar to the Khorne Berserker's ability and what you get in the Endless Swarm Tyrannid detachment. If one or more Accursed Cultists were destroyed by the enemy shooting, they get to make a Horde move, which is moving d6 inches towards the closest enemy unit, and when doing so, they can be moved into engagement range. However, they cannot make this Horde move if they are battle shocked. So as I'm saying, they're definitely fast, they're definitely able to get up the board quickly. If you wanted the regeneration back, then you will need to add in a Dark Apostle to the unit and use the Chaos Cult enhancement Amulet of Tainted Vigor. That lets you get D3 models back in your command phase. And even though they're very Chaos Cultist shaped, you can't use this on the little Dark Disciple attendants that go pop and cause mortal wounds to the enemy, because they don't have the damned keyword. And because it's an enhancement, you can't have both the Amulet of Tainted Vigor and the enhancement that gives you the Scout move. It's one or the other. The best choice of character to add to the Accursed Cultist is the Cult Commune. You can still advance and charge through the Cult Commune special ability. If you don't have them though, the Wordbearers detachment and the Chaos Cultist detachment have stratagems that let you advance and charge, but the Commune also gives your unit +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Now when you get into combat, you can do more damage. If you just wanted pure endurance, in Legends, the Chaos Sorcerer from the Blackstone Fortress is not bad. You get a 4+ invulnerable save against shooting that can make them very tough and hard to get rid of. But it doesn't always work. You have to roll a dice to see if it happens, it won't help you in combat, it fails on a 1, and for 5 points more, at least in index points, you get the Cult Commune that has a 5+ invulnerable save that is on all of the time. To make the Accursed Cultists go faster, you can put them in a Rhino. Up to 12 Heretic Astartes faction keyword models can go in the Rhino, and as the Rhino is a dedicated transport, it can scout move. But if you wanted to do that, you would be limited to a small squad of Accursed Cultists with 5 mutants and 3 torments. Having a full squad of 16 wouldn't fit. The Chaos Spawn, although they're not a damned unit, I like to include them here among the cultists, it's thematic. The Chaos Spawn can no longer regenerate. Instead, their ability is changed so that they subtract 1 from the objective control of enemies, except vehicles, when those enemies are within 3 inches. But the spawn themselves have gone down to objective control 0. If you're still going for the current detachment, now renamed to be the Pact-bound Zealots, based on the Wordbearers, having a Mark of Tzeentch to use Skin Shift on them and bring one of them back and heal the other one can be very annoying for the enemy. But thankfully, they're not as annoying to get rid of as they were in 9th edition, where they would instantly regenerate to full health after each attack unless they died. Even at objective control 0, if they're cheap enough, they can still complete secondary objectives. The special rule of the Fellgore beastmen has changed because the Chaos Cult detachment is basically what their rule was. You get +2 to the charge roll, although their special rule was only giving you +2 to a charge roll if you were charging an enemy on an objective. Now they are an outflanking unit. So if they're in strategic reserves, which is probably where you want to put them, considering we have other very similar cultist units that can just be on the table, they can come on a turn earlier than normal and count it as being 1 battle round sooner. So that means they can turn up in the enemy deployment zone on turn 2. Or if you drew secondary objectives that meant you had to be in all 4 table quarters, you can do that pretty easily by having the Fellgore beastmen arrive from strategic reserves on turn 1. Very useful for secondary objectives, and also, if you want to pin the enemy in their deployment zone, coming on turn 1 or attacking them turn 2 from behind, when the enemy will not be expecting it, has made the Fellgore beastmen more useful. Those are some small changes that have happened to the different cultist units. Now I want to look at the Chaos Cult stratagems. They are not the best. They are designed to make your chaff Chaos Cult units better. And they don't need to be better, they need to be there on the board and let the Chaos Space Marines do the actual killing. But anyway, here they are. Chosen for glory, means a damned unit can make a desperate pact, but not to get a bonus to the move or the charge, as those are phase specific. This is in the shooting phase or combat phase, not in the movement phase or charge phase. So you make a leadership test and you may lose some models. This lets you re-roll the hit roll. If you didn't fail the leadership test, you can also re-roll the wound roll. So that's nice for Accursed Cultists, and that may be why you want a Cultist Firebrand with them. Or you're gonna have the Cult Commune, then you're getting +1 to hit, +1 to wound, re-rolling hits and re-rolling wounds. The Accursed Cultists in this detachment are the ones that are going to be doing the very heavy lifting. The sad thing is they're not battle line, so you'll only be able to take 3 units of them. There's the Selfless Demise detachment. Each damned model that is killed in combat, you roll a dice. On a 6, an enemy unit takes 1 mortal wound. So if a unit of 20 was wiped out, you might do 3 mortal wounds to the enemy. You know what's better? Just using the grenade stratagem. Cultists and traitors have grenades. It's going to be really specific to, oh, the enemy charged in, they're incredibly weak, they only have 1 or 2 wounds left, they're about to slaughter a bunch of cultists, maybe you can take them down as well. Most of the time, the cultists are going to be able to punch upwards by using the grenade stratagem. Even 1 remaining traitor can throw the 6 dice to score as many 4+s as possible. Reckless Hate I've already mentioned, it lets you advance and charge, best on Accursed Cultists. Raised Focus could be better. You do a Desperate Pact, and you get +1 armor penetration, and if you pass the test, you also improve the strength by 1. This is shooting only, so it's not for Accursed Cultists, the combat cultists, but it's for the small traitor guard squad. Yeah, having AP -1 on las guns and on a melter gun and a flamer or a plasma gun, it could be okay, but if you're losing models and you take off the models before the shots are fired, you're massively diminishing the amount of shots you're getting when the squad is only 10 men anyway. The combat version is the stratagem Infernal Sacrifice. In the fight phase, you get to add 1 attack, and if you passed your Desperate Pact, then you get +1 strength. Now it's not +1 to wound, so boosting your strength 3 to strength 4 or your strength 4 to strength 5, it's not going to matter if the enemy is toughness 10, you will still wound them on a 6. However, if you're making full use of your Dark Communes and your Accursed Cultists, when you're getting +1 to wound, having +1 strength as well could potentially combine to give you +2 to wound. So you've gone from strength 4 against toughness 4, that would mean you wound on a 4+, improving it to strength 5 means that you're wounding on a 3+, and with the Cult Commune giving you a +1, you're now wounding them on a 2+. This is pretty good, but it relies on you passing their 7+ leadership test. Because the Chaos Cult is going to want support from the Chaos Space Marine vehicles, we have the stratagem Mortal Thralls. This allows you to pass wounds onto the cultist. It is any Heretic Astartes unit, so you can do it on your tanks. The enemy shoots, you use the stratagem, the enemy can't redirect their shots, as with the Dark Obscuration stratagem. What happens is they roll to hit, and all of their hits automatically wound, but they wound cultists. Every hit roll will kill a cultist, but equal to the damage. So las cannons will mow down d6 +1 cultists. I do hope you have plenty of cultists because you're going to need them, and plenty of units to support your cult. I think this is unlikely to be the best detachment, but it's the one that interests me the most, and the one I'll be most eager to try. We play for fun. And maybe the Chaos Space Marines are the best army for you. Alternatively, there are other 40k factions you may want to consider, like the Sisters of Battle, like the Gene Stealer cult, where the hordes of cultists can swarm the board in a lot of different ways. My darlings and viewers, have a great day with the Cultists of 40k.